I'm Bernie Mihm, and first of all, I'd like to thank y'all for having me here, and I'd like to thank y'all for doing these programs because I saw the one that Skip Etheridge did a week or so ago. I mean, just a superb program. So I thank you very much. So I'm a landscape architect. I'm a certified arborist. My first job as a teenager was working on a landscape crew in 1973. I started Fine Earth Landscape in 1977, and I have to say it's more enjoyable now than it ever has been. I really enjoy the work, and it's really fun working with all the different people and doing all the different gardens. And there's always something to learn. I mean, every day. I would say when I go onto a person's property, like 99% of the time, I'll know all the plants on the property. But every now and again, and that every now and again was yesterday, I went on somebody's property, and there I was, and I'm looking at a plant, and I'm thinking, I really don't know what that is. So again, it's really exciting. It's a really exciting job, and again, I learned something every day. So this is the first Zoom presentation I've ever done, so bear with me. So here we go. So fall is for planting, and fall is for planting trees and shrubs. I think October and November are actually the best months of the year for planting most trees and shrubs. There are a few exceptions, but in general, most of your evergreens and especially most of your trees are great for fall. The cool temperatures, usually the soil is pretty moist, and the coming dormancy of the plants will allow the roots to get established first. And that's really, really important because the ground freezes or gets cold later than the air. The leaves will drop off the trees and, obviously some of the shrubs, but the roots will still grow and they'll get established over the late fall, over the winter even, and early spring. And so by the time they re-leaf out again, you're going to have a much healthier plant than a plant that's planted in the spring. It's funny because people ask me, what's the best month for planting, or when should I not plant? I'm thinking really June is actually one of the worst months for planting, but we plant more plants in June than any other month by far. And obviously the reason for that is that's when people are calling in April, we're giving them proposals in May, and then they're accepting the work and we're scheduling for June. But June, all the leaves are already out. The plants can get stressed very easily. You have to be really diligent about the watering. This time of year, fall, if you're planting, you don't really have to be, well, I shouldn't say, you don't have to be as diligent. So this is our crew yesterday planting a home in Bethesda. This is a house that's going for sale. Just happened to go on the market now, but I wanted to take some nice pictures of the plants going in the ground. So we prepped the bed and we mixed in some organic compost into all the holes, and the guys are there planting away. And luckily the client won't have to be out there, every day putting water on it, because it's this time of year. So fall is also for sodding. The later in the season, the better. October and November, excellent time a year for sodding for pretty much the same reason as the planting, in that the roots will start growing, the roots will get established, the top doesn't grow as much, and then over the course of the winter, even in January and December and January, if the ground is not frozen, sodding is just fine. And you don't even have to water then. Whereas if you're sodding in even May, June, the more popular months for sodding, you really have to put the water on. July, very difficult to keep the sod alive. Really have to water it a lot. But this time of year, great time of year for putting down grass. Most of these pictures, the next several slides or next 10 or 12, are actually pictures taken in the spring. But all of these flowers are planted in the fall. So fall is the only time of year that you would really plant bulbs, flower bulbs. And fall is the best time of year to plant the spring flowers, the early spring flowers, violas and pansies. Obviously you can't plant the bulbs in the wintertime or in the spring. It's a little bit too late for that. And I'm going to give you several pictures here. This is one of my actual favorite bulbs, the big the big purple balls, those are allium. They're Allium Globemaster. Also, Allium Universe is another big one. So those are fall, plant them in the fall. It's a very large bulb, plant them in the fall. They come up the spring. They'll last, I've had them for about 5 years in my own yard, and none of them have shown any decline. They are supposed to peter out after time, but like I said, I've had them for the 5 years, and they should last for, you know, quite some time after that. The other plants in this photo here are not fall planted. Well, they may have been fall planted, but you don't have to plant them in fall. That's a Dianthus fire witch, the little pink one there. That's kind of one of my favorite combinations there, the Dianthus fire witch and the Allium Globemaster. These is probably in May this picture was taken, and salvia in the background. So salvia and the Dianthus fire witch are perennial, which means they come back every single year. And so violas, we plant, this is a spring flowering plant, or this is a spring photo. We plant them in October and November. We would usually plant them, they would come in either a 4-inch or a 6-inch pot. Most of these were in 6-inch pots. So we plant them in late October, early November. Over last winter, they flowered the whole winter, but most normal winters, they will kind of peter out a little bit in the winter. You know, you get a bunch of snow on the ground or get real cold temps, you won't have, you know, many flowers on them for a period. But once it starts to warm, even in March and April, you'll get the flowers that'll come out really nicely, really, really nicely, and they will last until it's time to put in the regular annual flowers, the begonias, and let's see, what do we put there? New Guinea impatiens we put in this particular place. So it really is a nice thing to plant when you want a 12-month, or pretty close to 12-month flower there. So we plant the violas or pansies in the fall. They last all through the spring. Unfortunately, when we take them out, they're still looking pretty good. It's usually in May, but we want to get our annual flowers in the same place. So we pull them out right when they're looking really nice, but you know, by June, they don't like the heat, they'll kind of peter out. But that's a nice fall planted plant there, violas. They are not deer resistant. So if you have a deer problem, that's not where you'd want to plant it. But otherwise, you know, sun, part shade, they do pretty well in either one, or actually really well in either one. These are some more violas. They're the yellow and purple flowers. They're along with my other favorite there, that Dianthus fire witch, which is the pink. But this again is a spring picture, but we planted all these in the fall. They lasted all winter. They came back in the winter. You know, it's a really nice plant. I really like that color combination there too, of the purple and the yellow. I think it's a really nice one. And so this is taken, obviously, after the daffodils. You can see the daffodils there too, which do not have flowers on them. So the daffodils have already flowered there. So that's probably taken in sometime in April, maybe even early May. This has become a lot more popular lately, planting cabbages and kale. It's sometimes hard to tell the difference between the two. The kales have a little more frilly leaf. The cabbages have a less frilly leaf. I didn't like these when they first started coming out with them. I can't remember when it was, but you know, they just didn't look that nice. But now there are so many different varieties. It's kind of neat to create these different areas with 2 or 3 different varieties here. And this is one that's a really nice customer of mine, picked out these herself. We've set them out and she really liked the arrangement there. So we planted them. They're mostly deer resistant. I really haven't seen where deer have been a serious problem with them, although I haven't planted them in like a real heavy deer area. I know there are deer here. By the way, that's not my client's yard in the background. That's the neighbor who hadn't cleaned up the leaves there. Yeah, so I haven't planted them in a real heavy deer neighborhood. I've planted them in, but there are deer in this neighborhood, and they've never touched those. So they won't last all winter. They'll last until it gets very cold. And then they'll kind of peter out. Last winter they lasted till February. Some of them even maybe at the beginning of March, but they didn't look near as nice as they did, you know, in the fall. but I think for that purple color and, you know, the mix, I think it's really nice. And there are lots of other different ones. They're white flowering, white and purple, and the leaf colorations and the leaf shapes, I think really make for a nice plant. But that's a fall plant. We would usually plant those right at the beginning of November or the end of October. So again, there we plant annuals, coleus, and what else we plant there? Oh, angelonia in that, and begonias in that spot there. So again, we plant the annuals there in May, and they last until frost, and then we plant the cabbages and kales there afterwards, and they'll last for a long time. So we get 10 months, 10 months maybe of flowers in that one area. So these are some more cabbages and kale. These on the other side of the driveway there. The similar sort of planting. You know, again, we have the rocks and some other colorful, longer lasting shrubs, a little evergreen there, a little globe blue spruce next to those. But I really like this color combination with the different types of cabbages and kale. And I have one more picture there. Yeah, and again, this just shows the different varieties that you can get. I mean, there's all different leaf shapes, colors, variations. You know, some people like all white, so we plant all white. You know, some people like, you know, these different colors, so we'll do that. So again, these are spring pictures, but fall gardening. Fall is when we did the work here. This is a mixed tulip border, and in the background, the far background, you can see the solid red tulip border. These bloom in spring. We plant them in November. Even early December is fine. Actually, even mid or late December. I've never had any trouble with tulips coming up. All the books say to plant 2 to 3 times. Plant the bulb 2 to 3 times as deep as the height of the bulb. I was just reading this the other day, and it's funny because I've never done that. We've always planted them just 1 to 2 times the depth of the bulb. And in fact, with tulips, I've found that if you plant them too deep, they struggle so much to get up through the soil. You just don't get as nice a flower. So I usually just plant them 1 or 2 times the depth of the bulb, and put a little bit of mulch on top, and that seems to work really well. And I kind of like this color combination of having all the different types together rather than just the solid. But either one depends on your own personal taste. Plant 1 bulb per hole, so you don't need to crowd them. You know, this is about the right spacing. The downside of tulips is deer love tulips. If you can see this yard, if you can maybe pick out in the background, it's kind of woody, but they do have an 8-foot deer fence around the whole backyard. So deer do not get into this yard. But deer will love tulips as soon as they start coming up in the spring. I mean, deer will just go after those. So if you have a lot of deer, again, not tulips, but otherwise, it's a really nice, really nice spring flower that you would plant in the fall. Here we have some yellow pansies, yellow and purple pansies, excuse me, with some mixed color tulips. Again, all planted in November. Yeah, that one we planted in November. Oh, by the way, with tulips, they're not necessarily a permanent type plant, meaning if we plant 100 of them, you know, the next year, maybe 60 to 80 come back. The next year after that, maybe 40 or 30 come back. So really what we normally do is at the end of in the spring after they've flowered, we just pull them all out and start over. They're not all that expensive. And so we don't want like bits and pieces of ones coming out. We just want to start those new, you know, all the time. Again, that's mixed there with the yellow and purple pansies. I think that's a really nice combination there. So the pansies are really nice. I mean, I like those a lot too. I've kind of drifted a little bit towards the violas. Here, I'll come back to that in a minute. Here's another picture. This is the solid red tulips, got a little bit of frill on them, with grape hyacinths in the front. They're the purple ones in the front. And then in the background, you can see some different multicolored tulips. There's whites, purples, maybe a little orange in there. So we do, this particular yard, we do a lot of different combinations there. And they'll flower pretty early. They'll flower usually in April, early April. And you could choose different flowering periods. You you can choose different early, mid, late, and you can get a combination that all flower in mid or early or whatever you want. Usually we try and mix a little bit. Let's see. Here we have purple and yellow violas as the foreground and daffodils. This particular client went to University of Michigan Law School, so he really likes I forget the exact color that they're talking about, but it's really, in my mind, it's purple, but they have a color that University of Michigan people describe their school colors as, but purple is going to do. So the purple and yellow works really well. Those flowered last winter. They flowered through the whole winter. We also have some grape hyacinths there. They're the purple ones over there near the rocks. And then daffodils, we had 2 colors of daffodils in there. I think that's a really nice, the really bright yellow ones are really pretty. And then in the backdrop, we have white. I think those had the orange centers. I'm not 100% sure, but those are really nice. Daffodils are largely permanent, which means that, you know, you plant 100 of them and then the next year there'll still be 100 there. So they'll last, you know, virtually forever. And they are pretty darn close to, I would never say anything is 100%, but it's 99 point something % deer resistant. I've never seen deer eat them. And we plant these in the very, some neighborhoods in Potomac and Bethesda that are just have very dense populations of deer and never excuse me, never ever had a problem with deer eating them. So that's a really reliable plant. Again, plant them, you know, the books say 2 to 3 times the depth of the bulb. I would say 1 to 2 is fine. And then, again, they'll come back every year. So that's really nice. So this is actually daffodils, mixed daffodils. This is along our driveway outside of Poolesville. And so we planted these in the turf. And I've done that in a number of different places. So they, you know, every spring these have come up. I've probably been here close to 10 years. I probably planted those a little too close. I don't even know how many thousands we planted, but it was a lot. I would have, if I had to do it over again, I would have, I'm not going to move them at this point, but I would have planted them a little bit further apart than these are. But it's a, you know, it's a nice combination. You cannot if you want them to come back every year, you cannot cut them down until they start to turn brown. So I would leave we leave this in the ground. They'll flower in April, and I have a couple different types in there. So they'll flower for a while, for quite some time. And then the green stalks will stay there. And no, it's not as pretty as a nice, you know, nice flat, neatly trimmed turf area, but it still looks okay. And then obviously as the grass is growing up in between them through April and May, you know, it starts to look a little rowdy, especially after the flowers all gone. But it's really important with daffodils to leave them there until they start to turn brown, and maybe even a significant amount of the leaf is brown. I'm sorry. The flower will turn brown as soon as it's done flowering, but the leaf will stay on there till June. And then we just mow it down, and then it's turf until the following year. And there are several places I've done this for clients where they have an area that's, you know, not like right in their front yard, but some little wilder area in the back. I have a client we're doing it for this year. He's got a little lake in Rockville, and so we're doing it over on the far hill where he doesn't have to cut that in the, you know, so much in the early spring. And again, this is one of my favorite combinations here with the rock boulders. That's a crepe myrtle tree there. We have, what do we have in the front there? The blue fescues, those are a little ornamental grass. And so here we have all fall planted plants that are flowering. And this is a spring picture. So we have our grape hyacinths in the front, and our, let's see, those are violas and pansy, I'm sorry, violas, and of course our daffodils in the back, and it really makes for a nice look there. I like the contrasting color there. And again, this is another picture of the same yard, and we have similar stuff, except we have the white flowering daffodils with the little orange centers, which I think are really pretty. And back there, next to that tree trunk along that ugly fence, there are some hyacinths back there, Grape Hyacinths, which are also pretty cool. Again, everything planted in the fall, nothing there, everything that's flowering planted in the fall. So that's pretty early spring, because you can see the roses, the knockout roses there are just starting to leaf out. So it's a while. And that's a really neat thing about all these plants is, you know, most of the perennials, the roses even, but the perennials that we plant, the long blooming perennials, they'll bloom most of the time in the summer, like Shasta daisies, black-eyed Susans, echinacea, coneflowers, all those nice ones. They're summer flowers. So if you're just waiting until until summer for your flowers to come out, it's just a long wait. So I think these really, you know, really make the spring really, really nice. And this is actually our own house. This little pathway in the front yard, and we have some tulips, which are not yet starting to bloom here in the foreground. We have a few stray daffodils there, which are blooming. The grape hyacinths are looking real pretty there. And the violas, which I think the violas, oh yeah, I was going to come to that. A lot of people plant pansies because you think, oh, pansies, that's the flower to plant. When we plant a lot of pansies too, and I like pansies. I think the violas, pansies have a little bigger flower for sure, but I think the violas have a little bit brighter color. At least some of them do. So we like those. And again, this is I think one of my favorite combinations and my favorite spring blooming but fall planted flower. These are those allium, the big balls. And you know, I like, this is front of our house. I planted a lot of these here. I can't even remember how many, but they're really, really cool. Those last for quite some time. They bloom in May for several weeks. Again, we have the Dianthus firewits there at the bottom, little pink, and I think that's a really nice combination. You know, I might have already planted. Oh, you know, this picture was probably even taken in late May, because I think I can see our coleuses there, which are the red in the sort of the middle right behind there. The coleuses are real small in this picture, but so those are still blooming when the coleuses are, you know, when we just put them in. So that's good. That has to be in later part of May when that particular picture was taken. So people say, oh, is it too late to plant? Well, no. So this is late fall is a great time of year to plant trees, and the later the better. This was in early December. We got a little bit of snow here. The really nice thing about planting at this time of year is you don't have to water. This was done for the town. And you know, you don't have to water after you plant them, and you don't have to water them so much immediately. And it does give the roots a chance to grow out, because they will grow, you know, even in the real late fall and early spring. Yeah, one of our clients, I think it was last year, was asking me, you know, because we were out there planting trees in December, you know, oh, it's too late to plant. I said, no, actually, we wait for this exact time so that we can plant these trees, because it's really the best time of year for planting trees. Yeah, I think even if they're planted in the fall, it's important to water them over the first summer, and sometimes even the second. Here in Poolesville, that the soil is really terrible. You can see where we mixed a lot of leaf compost in with this soil. You can see how dark it is. That's not the native soil. We mix it with the native soil, the native red soil that's over in Hunter's Run there. Yeah, and so it is important to water them over the summer, but the watering work is much lessened, because you don't have to water them, you know, as soon as you plant them, and a couple times a week, you know, right after that. You can just water them occasionally over the summer, and that should get them through the summer. And just like, I don't have pictures of pruning, but I'm just gonna briefly talk a little bit about pruning, because maybe some of you might have even seen my first YouTube video last month, I guess, on pruning. So with pruning, most plants, fall would not necessarily be the time you would prune them. Old-fashioned plants, azaleas, rhododendrons, forsythias, lilacs, all of those spring blooming plant shrubs. You really don't want to prune those too heavily in the fall. Yeah, you can take off an errant branch or two here and there, but you don't want to prune them back very heavily unless you're prepared to lose all the flowers for the spring. Because with those particular plants, the flowers are formed in the summer and the early fall. And so if you go through and you prune them now, they are not going to form new flowers by the time spring comes around. So there are some exceptions to that. Some, actually most, but not all hydrangeas. You can certainly prune in the fall. You can always prune dead branches, no matter what time of year it is, because you're obviously not pruning off any flowers, because a flower will not occur on a dead branch. Some people will have us do fall cleanup, and that's also very, very nice. So that would just be pruning back things like Shasta daisies, black-eyed Susans, echinaceas, daylilies, stuff like that, you know, where the foliage has died back down and it's fine. It just looks a little ratty over the winter. You don't have to do it. Horticulturally, there isn't any reason that you should do it. But just, you know, if you want to have the place looking nicer over the winter, you certainly do that this time of year, any of those things. And this is a picture of a sugar maple. It was planted in the fall, but now is the time. Right now is when, actually about 2 weeks from now, it'll look like this again. I took this last year or the year before, but we planted this in the fall. It's a beautiful tree, and it's one reason to get out and enjoy your fall gardening. Weather is excellent. It's cool days, sunny like we've been having. Lots of colors already out there, like the fall colors of trees. So it's a really great time to be out and enjoy your fall gardening. And I think that's it. So if anyone has any questions about anything, whether it has to do with fall or whether it has to do with summer or anything else having to do with plants, if I can answer them, I would certainly be happy to.
I have one question so far from the chat for you, which is, what is your favorite flower?
Oh my gosh, my favorite flower. I don't think I would have a favorite, of course, but I really do like the alliums, which are the ones that I showed you the picture of. They're the big purple balls, and I like when we plant a lot of them. I really like those. I really like the Dianthus fire witch, which I also showed you a picture of. Those are the perennial. That's got a small pink flower there. They last a long time. And I'm really starting to like, I shouldn't say it's starting to like, but I'm really liking hydrangeas a lot more.
Yeah.
Hydrangeas, different types of hydrangeas. There are the white ones, and then there's the colorful ones that will last for quite some time. And one other plant that I've been planting a lot of, and I really like, are the hibiscus, like that's his Copper King or Starry Night. They have a really nice big flower. That's a summer flower. So there's 4 that I think are my favorites. Tree would definitely be Crepe Myrtles. And the reason I say Crepe Myrtles is, people ask me about different trees to plant, and the answer is the same. A dogwood, redbud, crabapple, cherry, they're going to flower for about 1 to 2 weeks. And a crepe myrtle, that'll flower for about 2 months. So and they come in all different varieties. So there's maybe a much longer answer than you wanted to hear, but those are definitely my favorites.
I love crepe myrtles. My mom has a bunch of those. Those are her favorite also.
Oh, cool. What colors does she have?
She has pink and white.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another question for you from the chat is, fall a good time to move shrubs?
So actually, fall is an excellent time to move shrubs. And I would say right now, between now and Thanksgiving, for most shrubs, is the best time of the year. For the reason that I talked about planting in the fall, the same would hold true for transplanting. Cool nights, cool days, cool nights, moisture in the soil, use a lot less watering. So anytime, and actually, even December is fine. Maybe a couple of exceptions to that, some of the more southern shrubs, but really it's an excellent time for transplanting.
Awesome. The next question is, do you mulch in the fall? And if so, what kind of mulch do you use?
That's a really good question. So for us and for most of our clients, we only do one mulching, and that's in the spring. I would say that if your mulch has disappeared or disintegrated, composted within that time, you could put a leather light mulching on in the fall. It looks nice in the winter and it will insulate the soil actually quite a bit. It's pretty amazing how the soil will not freeze with mulch on it, but it will freeze without mulch. Bare soil will freeze. So bare soil will freeze much more easily. Most of our clients just do one, probably because of the cost. I do a little light mulching on ours. And actually we only use natural shredded hardwood or shredded oak bark is what we use. I don't personally like the colored mulch, the dyed mulches, and maybe that just comes from being old school. And the dye will, I don't think it's harmful or anything like that. I think it's somewhat based like food coloring and stuff, but it will stain. You leave it on the driveway for too long, it will stain. It's kind of light, it will blow. And if a dyed mulch can actually have anything in it, meaning, pieces of pallets chopped up and all that. Once you put that little bit of paint on there, nobody can tell. So I really like the shredded, only shredded oak. The other one is, they use different shredded mulch. Sorry, they do different shredded mulch, but we only use the shredded oak. I think that's the best.
Awesome. Our next question is, can you cut back irises?
Oh, yes. Yeah, for sure. And actually you could do that right now if you really wanted to. They're still going to be green right now, but you can cut them back. You don't want to cut them back too early because they do need that green leaf to photosynthesize, but it's fine to cut from here on out. It's fine to cut them back. Yeah. And actually to move them too. Irises over time, at least some of them they'll spread out, and then the inside part will kind of die. So the inside of the bulb mass will kind of die, or the root mass will kind of die, rhizome mass. And so they'll create some spaces there. So you can dig them out, separate them, and replant them. Now November is actually a little bit better, but anytime I'd say between now and Thanksgiving, now and actually probably now and Christmas is actually even fine in most years.
How far back do you prune hydrangea, knockout, and regular roses?
Oh, so we'll go with the roses first. We'll go with the roses first. Knockout roses. So we usually prune those back to about 30 inches or so in the spring when we're doing our spring cleanup. It's not going to hurt them to prune them back now, but I would not. Let me back up actually, because knockout roses, as long as the weather stays warm, they'll keep blooming. And I can remember going to church one year on Christmas and seeing some knockout roses blooming. It was a warm December, obviously. So I wouldn't lose those flowers and prune them back now. I would just wait until after all the leaves have dropped off and so forth. And so I would do that in the spring. So regular, and I would prune them 30 to 36 inches is fine. Regular hybrid roses, which not that many people grow anymore because they require so much spraying. So you really are like a rose expert. So to do that, to cultivate roses and to keep them going with all the spraying they need. So I would say 24 inches, a little taller than that, perhaps. That's about the right height for those. Hydrangeas, there are a lot of different hydrangeas, and that's why I'm hesitant to give advice on just a general pruning of hydrangeas. I'll give a couple of examples. There are oak leaf hydrangeas, which are kind of old-fashioned, they grow pretty well in the shade, have a big leaf. Those flower on the previous year's growth. So in other words, the branches that are formed this year, the branches that are there this year, the flowers have already formed on the branches. The flower buds are already there. So if you prune those back hard right now, it's the same as an azalea or forsythia. you're going to prune off most of the flowers. So with an oak leaf hydrangea, I would not prune them back at all now. So with the other hydrangeas, the white ones, Annabelles, limelights, they'll flower on the current year's growth, which means that the growth that comes out in the spring, the flower buds will form on that. So we don't really prune them back really hard. Actually, and the same with which is popular now, the endless summer, and the other types that are similar to that, endless summer, which are the pink to blue and purple. So those flower, those flower on both old and new. So I don't really see a reason to just hack those back. I mean, if they're getting out of whack, if they're getting way too tall, then I would just go in and just prune a few of the tallest branches back right to the ground and leave the rest. And that way you'll continue to have, the nice flowers. And limelight and Annabelles, those are white flowering. Again, you can prune them back almost as far as you want, but I wouldn't prune those back unless they're really getting out of hand. There isn't any reason to, just cut them back real hard. So sorry, maybe a little longer answer.
Oh, awesome. Thank you so much. I'm sure everyone's loving the answers. I just wanted to say, if I haven't gotten to your question yet, I promise I will. Just everyone's got lots of questions, so hang in there. Our next question is, when should you plant hydrangeas and do they need full sun?
Oh, that's a very good question, and it depends a lot on the type of hydrangea. So most hydrangeas do not want to be planted in the full sun. Your endless summer and similar twist and shout and similar types of hydrangeas, if you plant those in the full sun, those leaves are gonna burn in the summer, and they're gonna look pretty ugly by the end of the year. So those you would want in like a east side of the house, which is the morning sun, or maybe even the north side. I mean, they don't like, full shade, but they don't want full sun either. The Annabelles and the limelights, which are the white ones, they'll do well in full sun. And again, I think with the hydrangeas, either it's the same as other shrubs. You plant them in the fall, it's great. You plant them in the early spring, it's not quite as good, but it's okay as well. So those are the best times to plant. And when do we plant most of ours? In June, just like I said.
Right. Our next question is, I have a Cetus deodora, a gold cascade, which was supposed to be dwarf and is now up to the second story and too big for its space. Please help.
Yeah. I don't know what I can do then. So that may well be a dwarf of that variety, because a Cetus deodora will get 60, 70 feet tall, so maybe it's not quite as tall. Yeah, maybe it's a dwarf for that variety. You can prune those back some, but you have to be real careful. You can't prune it back so that there aren't any needles showing, because if you just leave a stub there, it's not going to grow back in. Yeah, sorry. You should have pruned that a little bit every year, and you would have kept it a little better in check there.
She's got too much of a green thumb.
Yeah.
Our next question is, why do maple trees suck the life out of hostas, and what else can be planted under maples?
That's a really good question too. These are really great questions your audience here is asking, knowledgeable people. So maples in general have a very have a very shallow root system, and it can grow in very thick. And so that's a very hard environment for most plants to grow in. So they will suck the water out. Actually, it's threefold. One is just the root competition will suck up the water. The other is the just the physical presence of the roots will not allow the roots of the smaller plants to grow in. And the third is, believe it or not, so with this heavy shade, if you get like light thunderstorms and light rains in the summer, that rain will end up just on the leaves of the maple trees and will evaporate off the leaves rather than getting down onto the ground. And so actually it's pretty dry too. So all those three things combine to make it a very tough environment to grow plants. So what we've found that works is Pachycandra. And sometimes we would have to spread a little bit of topsoil across, not a lot, but a little bit of topsoil across the roots in order for the Pachycandra to get established there. But that's, I think, your best bet. Helleborus, which is Lenten rose, that's another really nice shade plant. But that, when you're planting a Pachycandra, each plant is like about the thickness of, half a pencil, whereas Helleborus, it's usually in at least a 1 quart, but we usually plant 1 gallon plant. So you're going to have to try to dig a much bigger hole. And so generally that wouldn't be advantageous. So probably Pachycandra is probably your best bet.
Our next question is, I have a weeping cherry that sprouts from the roots. What can I do? It looks like weeds.
Yeah. So it depends. Well, actually, it doesn't depend. You'd prune it the same way. So most of the weeping cherries that you see are grafted. So in other words, you have one type of cherry. It's usually a Kwanzan cherry. It's the roots and the stem. And the stem goes up to about 6 feet. And then the weeping cherry is actually grafted onto that. So you don't want the lower part, the lower stem or the roots, to take over that tree, because then it's not a weeping cherry anymore. Then it's actually a Kwanzan cherry. So the only thing you can really do there is just keep pruning them off, and that's exactly what I would do. And I know they're going to grow back every year. The technical term is suckers, believe it or not. So anything that comes out of that lower stem and those roots, you just want to just prune that off every year.
Our next question is there an ideal planting for the swale along the street? Grass has a hard time on the slope.
That would be a really hard one. See, most of the swales will grow grass. I have a feeling that it could be that the soil there is not good for grass, and I don't think it would be. Yeah, so first of all, it would depend on how steep the swale is. So if it's a reasonably sloped swale, then you should be able to grow grass on it. Even, and I guess the other question is whether it would be sun or shade. You really should be able to grow. You really should be able to grow grass on there. If you're looking for a plant that will do well in a wet area, irises actually do really well in a wet area. Although I'm not so sure. Maybe a combination. Well, here's what we would have done. What we've done in some places: a combination of irises and maybe some round river stone, to make it look nice. I think that's a good combination. If the soil is, I'm kind of jumping around a little bit, kind of thinking out loud. If the soil is really terrible there, which, in Poolesville it really is, I mean, you could try, and that's the reason that the grass isn't growing there. If it's sunny and it's just the soil is bad, I mean, what you would do would be to till it up and put some leaf material, some leaf compost in there, and then or topsoil, and then sod on top of that. Only problem there is you really have to use the sod staples to staple that sod down, because you get a big thunderstorm right afterwards. It's going to wash that sod right down into your neighbor's yard. So sorry I went on a little bit on that question, kind of thinking out loud there of solutions. Yeah.
No, but thank you so much for your help and for your thoughtful answers as well. Our next question is, we have a very tall and wide Nellie Stevens holly tree. How far back can it be pruned?
Well, that's a really good question too. So I have a good friends in Poolesville that had one that was as tall as the house. The houses were built in probably late 80s, as tall as the house. We, in early spring, late winter, we cut them back we reduced them by half. And I told him, I said, you're going to have to have faith that I'm doing the right thing here. So we cut them back to like 15 feet. There were very few leaves left on them at that time, but they've both grown back in really nice. So the answer to that is, as long as you can be a little bit patient, you can bite the bullet and prune them back in like February or March, almost as far as you want. They will leaf out over that coming year, 90% of the time. They will leaf out over that coming year. And the reason they leaf out so quickly is because they still have a huge root system that supplies those leaves with nutrients and water. And so it'll push out a lot of growth. It's not like a normal amount of growth. I mean, it'll push 2 or 3 feet sometimes of growth out there. So the answer is, as far as you want, you probably want to do it late winter because it's going to look ugly as can be right after you do it, but you have to have a little patience and they'll grow back.
Thank you. You said the fall is great for sod. How about grass seed?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Fall is great for seeding too. So we're getting not quite at the end of the time for seeding, but a few weeks ago would have been a better time. But yeah, fall is really the only time you want to seed if you want to establish a new lawn. And we've done several actually last month, and you know, you'll want to get on that pretty fast because you want the grass seed to come up and germinate and come up and be, you know, established before winter. So that is a really great time. You still, though, I tell people you have to keep it moist in order for it to establish well. So after it's seeded, you know, it's every day or sometimes twice a day. It doesn't have to be floating away, but you want to keep it moist.
What are your thoughts on cutting the tops off of trees?
I don't like it. Yeah, that's not a professional way to prune a tree. Yeah, I guess that's all I have to say about that.
If anyone else has any questions, you can feel free to unmute, but that's the end of the questions that I received in the chat. Anyone else? All right, well, otherwise, I'd just like to say thank you so much for your presentation. Those were some very thoughtful answers, and I feel like I learned a lot personally.
Great, well, thank you, Dottie. I'd also want to just mention my daughter, Anna, who, as I said, this is the only time that I've ever done a Zoom presentation. And she was the one that helped me do and I've only done a couple PowerPoints, honestly, and she was the one that helped me set it up. And, you know, she did a really good job at helping me set it up and doing it. Dad, do this, Dad, do that. So great. And thank you, Dottie.
Anna. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you, Anna, and thank you, Bernie.
Yeah, thank you, Bernie.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
This was great. It was so interesting.
Thank you so much.
Yay. Loved it.